But because Umar ibn Sad was there in Karbala, we need to look at it very carefully, because when we look at his life, we begin to think, what would I have done if I was in that time period? You see, Umar ibn Sad knew who the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam were. And when Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad came to Kufa, he knew that Umar ibn Sad, his father was a companion of the Prophet, who was a warrior, who was well known amongst Muslims and respected, and he wanted to make him the leader of the army that would stop and fight Imam Husain. But he was a shrewd man. What he did was, he first asked him if he would fight Husain. And Umar ibn Sad refused. Why would I fight the grandson of the Prophet? Because he knows who he is. What Ibn Ziyad then does is, he says, I hear that the province of Ray does not have a governor. And I was thinking of writing a letter to Yazid and recommending your name, that perhaps you could be appointed as the governor of Ray. Because he knew this was his weakness. The love of this world, materialism, the desire for power, for fame. And the reason this is frightening is because when you study human nature, you will find consistently that people who stand against all odds, they fail when they're tempted with fame, with power, with authority, with leadership, with wealth. You will see that human beings in their early stages, they run after physical desires. As they grow older and their desires begin to wane, they run after wealth. They spend an enormous amount of time in their career, building an empire, collecting money. But after they have amassed wealth, what do they go after? Fame, authority, leadership, power. This is the temptation that is very, very difficult to resist. What was it that brought shaitan down? It was leadership, isn't it? When Adam was appointed as Khalifa, that is when his true color was shown. What was the downfall of those companions of the Prophet who betrayed the Prophet's trusting and appointing his successor after the Prophet closed his eyes? It was the issue of Khilafah, it was the issue of leadership, the temptation that they could not give him. Observe this in your own community. All the controversies that you will find in any community, it centers around the fight for leadership. I cannot tell you how many examples I have heard of beautiful communities that coexist and get along extremely well until a new center is built. Each and every one of you in this room, I'm sure, knows of one example, regardless of where you live. Even if there are 10 families or 5 families, they will live together, they will share together, they will get together at people's homes, they will hold majlis, they will hold programs. As soon as a property is purchased or a center is built, immediately it will split and 2 jamaat will form. And fights will begin. And both of them believe they are fighting lillah, they are fighting for justice, they are fighting for Allah, they are fighting for Islam, they are fighting to serve Imam Husain. But surely one of them is fighting for the world. One of them is fighting for leadership. One of them is fighting for authority. This is what's happening with Umar ibn Sad. Now, when Ibn Ziyad says to Umar ibn Sad that, look, I can give you the governorship of Ray, the narrations tell us what Umar ibn Sad says to them, to Ibn Ziyad, is, give me one night, let me think about it. He goes home, and the narrations tell us, there's a very detailed account of this. The entire night, Umar ibn Sad stayed up thinking, should I fight Husayn or should I not fight Husayn? Should I give up the governorship of Ray? Should I not give up the governorship of Ray? He consulted other eminent companions and people in Kufa. Every single one of them told him, don't do this. Don't fight the grandson of the Prophet. You will destroy your akhirah. He was still in two minds. Do I do this? Do I not do this? When the sun rose the next morning, he composed some verses of poetry in which, the gist of which was that akhirah is there, but who has seen it? The governorship of Ray is right there in my hands. Basically, a bird in hand is better than 2 in the bush. Because who has seen akhirah? And in his poetry he says, even if I kill Husayn, I can always do tawbah after that. Allah has promised if you do istighfar, He will forgive you. So he comes to Ibn Ziyad and says, okay, I'll do it. Ibn Ziyad gives him an army of 4,000 men. Imam Husain arrives in Karbala on the 2nd of Muharram. Umar ibn Sad arrives on the 3rd of Muharram. Now the books of narration tell us that when Umar ibn Sad left Kufa, after he was in the outskirts of Kufa, he stopped, he camped, he went back to Ibn Ziyad to tell him, I don't want to do this. That is why I'm telling you, he was very different from the others. But look at what destroyed him. He went back to Ibn Ziyad and said, I do not feel this is right to fight Husayn. Relieve me of this position. And Ibn Ziyad convinced him once again that look, you might not have to kill him. He might agree, he might pledge allegiance, this and that. Just go and you'll get Ray. He kept mentioning to him that. The temptation, the world, materialism, dunya. He went out again and he said, okay, I'll go to Karbala. He comes to Karbala, you pick up any book of Maqtal, from the 3rd of Muharram, every night Umar ibn Sad had a meeting with Imam Husain. On some of the nights they stayed up all night talking and discussing and debating. And Imam al-Husain was trying to convince him, look Umar ibn Sad, you know I am the son of Fatima. You know you will destroy your akhirah. Don't do this. I have orchards in Medina. I will give you those orchards. He's like, I don't want wealth. I want leadership. I want the governorship of Ray. And Imam Husain told him, you will not even get to eat a seed or a grain from Ray. And he knows Husain is right. That if Husain has said you will not eat a grain of Ray, you will not. But he still doesn't want to give it. He writes a letter on the 4th of Muharram back to Ibn Ziyad. He says to Ibn Ziyad, I have asked Husain, why did you come to Kufa? And Husain has said that he only came to Kufa because the people of Kufa invited him. And that if they no longer want him anymore, he is willing to go back. So I suggest we release Husain and return him to Medina. Because he does not want... So what he is trying to do is, he wants dunya and he wants akhirah. And this is our dilemma. I will relate it to our own lives, practically. What happens in our lives, where we are faced with challenges. There are those amongst us who go right after dunya, and they say, forget about akhirah. We'll deal with it when we come to it. Who knows, right? We're not talking about them. We're talking about those who are in a situation where I want akhirah, but can I give up dunya? So now he's trying to somehow get the governorship of Raya without killing Husain. So he says to Ibn Ziyad, Husain is willing to go back to Medina. Problem solved. Let's release him, and you're not in threat in Kufa. And Ibn Ziyad begins reciting poetry. He says, now that I have trapped Husain, he is trying to escape from me. Because this is his understanding. So he writes back to Umar ibn Sad. He says, no, you don't release Husain. Now demand allegiance from him. So now Umar ibn Sad is trying to press Husain. Just pledge allegiance. Once you go back, you can do what you want. This, that. And Imam Husain is trying to explain to him, I am an imam over people. I cannot be a hypocrite. I cannot lie. I cannot pretend. This cannot happen. On the 7th of Muharram, water is denied to the Ahlul Bayt in Karbala. Umar ibn Sad writes another letter to Ibn Ziyad. This time, he comes up with a draft proposal of several terms and conditions. He says to Ibn Ziyad, I have thought about this very deeply, and I believe that if we present these terms and conditions to Husain, he will accept it. Give me permission to present this to Husain, that if he accepts this, then we let go of him. And we don't demand bay'ah from him. So now, when the letter comes to Ibn Ziyad, he sees that, things are getting bad. Umar ibn Sad cannot control the situation. And Shimr al-Jawshan is sitting beside Ibn Ziyad, and he says to Ibn Ziyad, Umar is a weak man, send me, I will sort this out. And so Ibn Ziyad now sends Shimr. You see, all these individuals that we read about, Hormala, Uli, Hasin bin Namir, Shimr al-Jawshan, these were not just individuals in the army. These were the leaders of every battalion, every platoon. 4,000 men, 10,000 men, 8,000 men, 6,000 men. Each one of them was led by one of these. That's why their names are so well known to us. When Shimr al-Jawshan comes to Karbala, he comes on the 9th of Muharram at the time of Dhuhr. And by the evening of 9th of Muharram, he is ready to fight a battle. It is at that point that Imam Husain sends his brother Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas to ask Umar ibn Sad not to start the battle on the night. He arrives at noon, and that very same day by evening, he has his troops ready to attack Husain. Whereas Umar arrives on the 3rd of Muharram, and he has still not begun a battle. And Umar ibn Sad says to Shimr al-Jawshan, and this is recorded in the books as well, that I know it is you because of whom Ibn Ziyad did not accept the terms and conditions that I wrote. And I know it is you who wants to take the leadership of this army after me. And Ibn Ziyad gave a letter to Shimr al-Jawshan to give to Umar ibn Sad. And that letter said to Umar ibn Sad that I have appointed Shimr al-Jawshan as the second in command. You must now either take allegiance from Husain or kill him. And if you cannot do this, then no longer will you get the governorship of Rai, and the leadership must be handed over to Shimr al-Jawshan. So Umar ibn Sad now has a dilemma. He either gives up the leadership to Shimr, or he fights Husain. And it is at this point that he gives in to dunya over akhirah. He makes a choice. The choice he makes is that I will still fight for the governorship of Rai. And to make it very clear that Shimr al-Jawshan should not go back and claim that it was he who began the battle, on the day of Ashura, it was Umar ibn Sad who shot the first arrow, and he declared to his people, O people, bear witness, it is I who shot the first arrow towards Husain. Why did he do that? Because he wanted to establish that I am the leader. All these examples, this detailed account, I think it is almost as if it was Allah's plan that amongst all these individuals in Karbala, who are wretched, who are brutes, who are hard-hearted, who are evil men, one amongst them and their leader was a man who was not known for the cruelty in his heart, but for the love of the world. So that he sets an example for us, that we learn how dangerous it is when a person cannot control his desire for dunya. If you can recite as-salatu.